maybe this comes up, my Next Jump journey. And one of, I think, the principles that we do here at Next Jump is, and I think really believe on, is showing kind of who you are as a person when you show up for work. And that's complex. We bring good things, we bring challenges. And from when you start as a new hire here is kind of in your PLB, we call it like right in their first week you're introduced, you talk about, it's like a one-pager, stand up in front of the company. Where do you come from? Who sacrificed for you? You know, what are your dreams? What is one thing you kind of want to work on, a secret talent? We do these things called leadership 10Xs, where you've seen kind of the 10X, but you really talk about who you are, your journey, and your leadership side. And so I had the privilege, now several Navy teams have been doing this, and I think two leaders, in fact, in New York, Rudy Gonzalez and Jason Brown, I get the privilege of observing their Navy journeys to their team, and incredibly vulnerable and open. And so I thought today I'd return the favor and share with you my journey. So my journey at Next Jump is a 21-year journey. In fact, when we finally had a real office and we moved out of the basement, that was my first computer. We named all our computers after Seinfeld characters, which dates me a little bit, but my computer was Kramer, which may explain a little bit, but that was my first, that was our first office. So if you go to I don't know do you mind driving, Tom, or? So before I get into my Next Jump journey, let me just give a little bit of context so I grew up in Arizona. I have a sister a year and a half younger. My dad came from Montana, my mom from Philadelphia. And if I had maybe two things, maybe I'll share, that maybe kind of describe some of my childhood. One was, we called this phrase of Kunkel, suck it up. We didn't talk really about problems. It's kind of something bad happened, you kind of moved on, you sucked it up. In fact, my grandfather grew up in Montana. It was a kind of a mining community. And the only real story I heard for all growing up was he never missed a day of work. It was like a huge accomplishment. And the second part, I was always the smallest kid. Always. Like my dream was, as I said yesterday, I like to play sports. My dream was to be like a baseball player, basketball player. And I think the most crushing moment was when I was 11 and the doctor told me that they can measure your wrist or something. I was only going to be like 5'8". And I was like, oh, that's just horrible. But, you know, I got used to being kind of the smallest kid. And my nickname in high school actually was Mighty Mouse. And I made the water polo team. And they made the varsity go to the kind of the JV team. And I was, when I entered high school, just to give some context of how little, I was 4'10", 74 pounds, and my voice hadn't changed. So that's a little bit of a rough start for high school. But they would, you know, I didn't even know what Mighty Mouse was, but you know, it was there's a saying, it's like, here I come to save the day. It means that Mighty Mouse is on the way. And so they used to sit in the stands and cheer when I got in and sing the Mighty Mouse song. And that kind of stuck with me. And you know, I like this thing here of like, I got this, which in my own head, I think I built up over time of you know, in many ways, I think describes me. So a fun fact, I grew up in Phoenix, but I went to high school in New Hampshire. So that's actually Charlie. Charlie and I came from opposite worlds. He's Korean, from a Korean family, grew up in Nigeria. He's going to give some of his story tomorrow. But we met in high school and became best friends. That's how I know Charlie. And but I think you know, when I started Next Jump, I had a degree in economics, so I went to Standard & Poor's. I was an economist. Literally never thought I was going to do kind of a startup side. And Charlie had started this and said, Greg, like we need someone that knows, like, you know, accounting and financials, of which I knew none of it. But I was like, well, you know, economics close. And so anyways, I jumped in. You know, one of the things I talk about is I do think kind of my strengths and what I've done, and you'll see it in a second as I go through some of my journey, is, you know, this willingness to kind of dive into, you know, it's this thing, I got this. I've prided myself, and I pride myself of bringing energy into things, getting started. But it's common, you know, there's an Achilles heel to that, and it has been, it's helped me, and I think it is a strength. But you know, we call this kind of the crippling effectiveness part. And I think for me, you know, I've long had this narrative, which I kind of grew up with, of seeing vulnerability and talking about problems, admitting when I don't got this, or, you know, it's not happening. I've often viewed that I'm letting other people down, and I've really really struggled with not viewing that as a weakness. And the other part is this kind of willpower in a system, and building a team. And I think, especially timing right now, and as we've built, I need a team. And if I'm going to accomplish something bigger, something larger than me, this has been a very difficult part that I've long struggled with. So that gives, if you go to the next page, it gives a little bit of overview of my background. So let me walk through kind of my tenure here at NextJump. So I started in '98, as I mentioned. It was a complete whirlwind. So just to give you a sense of even the first couple years, we literally started with 4 people. We hired interns. Megan was one of our first interns, so that's a fun fact on Megan. And it was exciting. And within about 2 years, Charlie in particular raised about $30 million from angel investors. We scaled up. You probably saw it in the journey. We scaled up to about close to 200 people. In fact, we moved our headquarters to New York. I ran our Boston office. So literally from the time of being an economist to now I'm running 80 to 100 people. In the very beginning, you're like, you kind of joke around, you have no idea. But now all of a sudden you have 80 people, running behind you, older than me, some younger than me, some knowing, looking to you for direction. I quickly accelerated into this notion of my outer voice of, I got this, I'm sure, with my inner voice being like, I have no freaking idea what I'm doing right now. It magnified and magnified. And to the point that, I responded to that by being, working harder, more hours, pushing harder. And my wife now, my girlfriend at the time, literally, I think at one point said, if you continue to do this, we're done. And, but I didn't know any kind of different. And to the point we went through, and you kind of saw in our culture tour, we went down to 4 people. We then built back up. I left. I felt I needed a change at that time. I left. I went back and got my MBA so I could try to compete with kindergartners. And I came back in 2005. And I think, I won't go through all the details, but I think some of the high points for me that I've been really proud of is I opened up the UK office. I rejoined kind of the Strat group after about a year plus from being back. I then took over in 2010. We moved Kevin McCoy, who now runs our UK office. He moved to London. I took over the Boston office. My wife's from Boston, and it worked out kind of family-wise. I've led many of the new kind of people initiatives, or the people initiatives we have. I started the first 10X. I started our onboarding program. There are many kind of the initiatives that I've been really proud of, and I've seen kind of the struggle of getting them started, what it's like. I had a whole conversation today of how do you get started on things. I have made more mistakes and felt more pain on that, but I've also been it's been some of the highlights of my NextJump career so far, including, working with Tom and running kind of this newer part of our business. It's something that really stands at the pinnacle of my career so far at NextJump. All of those, though, have come with an Achilles heel. And in fact, some of my bigger valleys, my biggest challenge, I've had this kind of recurring theme of to this notion here, the gap between my inner and outer voice grew. I would come up similar patterns. Things would go flat. They wouldn't work. Problems would magnify. And I didn't talk about them. I couldn't talk about it. I felt I couldn't talk about them. I didn't expose them. Things would come at this cycle. Challenges come up, would lead to more silence. I'd work harder. This pattern would happen. I've had, in 2012, when I left, I ran what's called our EPP team. So it's like our HR business. I was close to the team. I built many of those people on the team. The entire team turned over in a year and a half. Entire team. And I've long prided myself on being a good coach, being a good leader. It killed me. It just killed me. And, it's one of those things that it was very easy to kind of make excuses at the time. And in fact, I didn't properly reflect at that time because it happened again. This notion of we built and kind of changed our Perks at Work product. And that kind of notion of avoiding problems. So I'll touch into it again. But I think this flavor for me of things I've been proud of starting, getting to a certain point where there are problems. And then I've had a recurring issue of not moving towards those, not dealing with those effectively. And ultimately, it's led to either people leaving, the project needed somebody else in terms of leadership, and my leadership was at some point had run its course. And I get to today of where I'm facing today and where we are. We're growing very quickly. And I think I put this down here. It's like right today, not just in the past, of growing teams and building better owners, building better co-owners, all the things I talked about yesterday. It's an immense struggle for me. It's an immense struggle to quickly adjust and to adjust and continue growing my own leadership. So let me touch a few stories on that. If you go to the next page. So I mentioned that I started the onboarding program. So I started the onboarding program. It was a personal leadership boot camp. And we had a lot of, there was a lot of skepticism up front in the sense of how can you put new engineers, new kind of people right into some, have them talk about who they are as a person, give them feedback, challenge in the beginning, they know nothing. We're in a very competitive space. We compete with Facebook, Google's, technology companies are 3.5 million unfilled job positions. There's, we know the head of learning from Facebook, and they struggle with giving feedback because they're concerned about giving direct feedback to someone because they may just leave and go directly over to Google or go to Amazon. And we have the same concerns. If you give feedback to someone right early on, they're going to be like, oh, I made a terrible decision. So we built this, we believed in it, and we went through. About 9 months later, we had what we call an owners meeting, which is for kind of all the MV21, the leadership team. And I presented to the rest of the team kind of the status of, onboarding. So, not that some of you give a brief today. Some of you may have gotten one. Some of you got a mix of it. You had about 45 minutes, 50 minutes. And this is what I've been doing for nine months. My peers know each other well. And I got all ones. I got 20 ones. So Beth showed it a little bit. So putting aside the LBR process of, my honest initial reaction was like, excuse the language, but fuck this. People don't know how difficult it's been to start, and they don't know my shoes. And there were some comments in there that were, Greg doesn't seem to care about this. I'm like, what are you talking about? I've put so much in this. I have my other job too. And so once I got through that, and I talked with Tom, I then came back and reflected. One of the things you can kind of see in here of this notion of deflected it, avoided the issue, avoids talking about it, kissing off the problem. And what really struck me was these are my peers. And one of the challenges with onboarding is everyone that goes to the onboarding program, is now going into everybody's team. And the thing I thought, even though it was my initial reaction is, and then I ended up appreciating is everybody cared about making a good onboarding program. These are the future next jumpers that are coming onto their teams. They came from a good spot. And it forced me to have a really hard look of a recurring issue of me of, even it's something I'm proud of with people that are, on my team. It is that difficult for me to open up and talk about these issues that we could solve potentially together or hopefully together. And that led me, especially because it wasn't just coming from Charlie and Megan, this was coming from my peers. It hit me in a way that had not really hit me before in my career. So if you go to the next page, I'd like to say that solved me just from the awareness side, but it did start me going through and chipping it. So about a year later, we have our leadership offsite, and so Tom and I were running the What's Working, What's Not exercise for our leadership team, and Charlie and Megan had given kind of a overview ahead of things before, and so we're doing this What's Working, What's Not, and later on that evening, Charlie gave a comment to me, and he said, "Greg, what was going on with you during the What's Working, What's Not session?" And I said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "Tom, when you were up there, Tom was getting the paper and putting it up for you if you needed something. He was very he was paying attention to what you were doing. When Tom was up there, you had this scowl on your face. You were not helping him. You were not observant. You weren't alert. You were kind of being a dick." And so he was like, "So my assumption is that maybe you don't think Tom was doing a good job. It's like you were annoyed with him or frustrated with him." And I was like, "Whoa!" It was not my intention. And I was my first reaction honestly was you didn't pick up on the right signals. So 2 nights later, I was sleeping in the middle of the night. I woke up at 3 a.m, and it hit me, which was right before that Charlie had gone through his own part of his journey, and he talked about the difficulty of 60 days of bloody noses when we went down to 4 people, and what he went through and how proud he was of the 4 people that stuck it with him. And I wasn't one of those 4. I had left. And, I even today, I kind of get emotional for it in the sense of, and I had never really, when I left to go to school through this, I kind of moved on. I did move on. And obviously I came back and, Charlie was the best man at my wedding. And but I never really shared with him what had gone on for the year before of my versions of aloneness, what I went through. And I never ended up coming clean to him. And the irony was what I think had happened, not even think. What had happened was Charlie had referenced that point. I was in my head. I was in my head the entire time Tom was doing that exercise. I was doing the exercise. And I wasn't even aware of it. And what struck me, and so I wrote this kind of whole note, which, of kind of just coming clean about the whole part. And it ended up being a really good conversation of things that I had held on for literally 12 years, narratives in my head of what Charlie must think and my kind of guilt on it. He was like, he barely even remembered half of it. And it started me down this kind of recognition of like, God, like for me, one of my emotions that I just move on and I ignore is a version of guilt. Things when I don't got it that I feel like I should, or in this case that I left, someone that I care deeply about, but I felt in the lurch, felt an organization or a team. And the unintended consequences of that, it started me being like, my gosh, in some ways that was a bigger thing. How often do I do it? And I'm still uncovering that today. So if you go to the next page. So one of the things we talk about are what are the practices that I do here at Next Jump. And I'm going to end with one more story. So, I've been chipping away at this. And so one of the parts for me, I'll mention kind of four that have been helpful. And I need to work at these things consistently. But the first one is on my mind. And the particular one for me is like frustrations and kind of the external energy is easy for me to get to. I can do it like that. The harder one is where do I feel, even the little parts, a sense of guilt, a sense that like, I feel like I don't really got this and I don't feel good about it. That has been so helpful to me. It's been so helpful to me of just coming clean in little ways. It might be people on my team. It might be to Tom. It might be to others. It might be how I treated them. It's been, as I've seen this, a breath of fresh air that gives me the kind of that clean mind to move on. When frustrated with others, I burn off a Tom. So it's like I burn off my frustration before I act on it. Team meetings, this has been really helpful for me in team meetings. I can talk. I like to talk. I like to get into it. I don't hold my point of view back. Just starting with what's on people's minds. So having like as a teammate, have the most junior person go with what's on their mind before they start. It's allowed me in many ways to listen more and dial up and be more kind of in the moment. And lastly, this face the reality. I actually got that quote from Jason Brown when he did it, which I loved, of facing the reality. And for me, it's like I can easily point out the good things that are going on. But for me, it's like being able to face and talk about and move towards like the things that are not going well. And to do that, I often do that with Tom. I do that in other ways with the team, and it's helped me considerably. So if you go to the next page, I just wanted to share and kind of end with two slides, but one story really. We talk about here that of parenting and the it's a great crucible for leadership. And so let me explain this slide a little bit. So in the middle is Theo. So I have two sons. You saw them a little bit yesterday in baseball, but Theo's 10. He just graduated from 4th grade, moving up to 5th grade yesterday, which is why I was a little late. But when he first, and I have a younger one, Elliot. And so Elliot, the younger one, he's like very social. He didn't get my genes. He's like social. He's easygoing. Theo got the anxious gene, and struggles with a lot of the things. It's sometimes sad to see that. I'm like, oh, you're only supposed to get my good stuff. And so there was a part right before 1st grade. He was going to a new school, and we had gone away for Labor Day. And so probably not the best decision, but we came back late on Monday night. He had school, first day of school. And so we're all getting ready that Tuesday morning to go. And it's, I'm coming back to work, and it's first day of school. And so they got to get dressed, and he's got to put on his uniform and all this stuff. And so, and he wasn't getting dressed. He wasn't he wasn't getting ready. And the time's ticking. You don't want to be late for the first school. So my first reaction is, to be like, come on, get to school, start to mandate, and come on, you got to get ready, get dressed. You have 5 minutes of getting dressed. And it wasn't working. And so, my second iteration was, all right, Greg, I get it. He's nervous about going to school. It's his first day. He's anxious. And so I said, there was a picture for me right before I went to 1st grade. And I said, I was nervous right before I went to first grade. That was my next thing. It's like, I was nervous. So I said, Theo, I get it. I was nervous when I went to first grade. So I get what you are. Go get dressed. And that didn't work either. And, one of the things, Beth had talked about it is that I from Brene Brown that I like is the picture on kind of the left is what I call sympathy. You're looking down from that top, and you're looking down at someone that's in a hole, and you're giving them advice. And in many ways, that's what I did in some ways of saying, that's what I, back in first grade. The other one is getting into the hole, and that's empathy. That's kindness. And so I stopped and I said, I had a really rough week the week before at Next Jump. And it was just, you never want to go on vacation right before like a tough week, but it was. And when I actually took a step back, I wasn't excited about coming back to Next Jump. I had to I had to talk in our staff meeting. It was bad. I hadn't processed it. Honestly, the last thing I wanted to do was come to work that day. And so I got down, I said to Theo, actually, I was nervous about coming to school, to work today. And I explained to him why. And he had really big eyes, and without really saying much, went up and got dressed. And I share that in the sense of, doesn't come naturally for me to share that I'm struggling in that moment. And, he knows how much I give to Next Jump and how big a part of it. He knows what we do here. And it's a good example for me of, in my own part of an aha, of how often I just do this in all facets. And I'm super grateful for Next Jump and what I've learned here and different. And so I'm going to end with this. If you go to the next page. So this I actually got yesterday. So I haven't fully even processed this, but I couldn't be more proud. It's been a tough year for Theo. He's struggled with, he's not the best student. He's struggled at math. He's struggled at reading, and I see, he's socially anxious. So he doesn't, like father, like son, doesn't like to ask for help. And so we've really worked with him this year on, he's got a tough teacher, and to kind of, ask for help. So I'll just read this because it's kind of a small quote, but it's, Theo, General Sherman, the giant sequoia in California, began as a tiny sapling. The mighty Nile is nothing more than a collection of drops that flow out of Lake Tana in Ethiopia. You, my good friend, began the year quiet and small, but with each passing day, you've become more formidable. You become a prolific writer and a determined mathematician. Never ever quit, and you will become the kindness of all the giants. And so, it was awesome to kind of hear that about your son. But I also had to laugh a little bit because it's in there. It's like the never quit and the perseverance. But the part that that's kind of made me think about, it's like I'm on my own journey with a tree, just like he's on his journey in the tree, and we're at different parts. And the fact that he's learning right now, and I feel just so grateful that I think of, and I don't know exactly what the teacher means, but the kindness part is that he did a different approach than I did. He asked for help this year. He admitted that he was struggling with things. And I think, there is a part going back to the Brene Brown of being in the arena, in the hole with somebody, that there's a strength to have the challenges that we have and the strength of the problems that we have. And we can, in many ways, that to me is kind of the true kindness. So anyways, that's my journey. Thank you.